I've always liked solo camping. Something about being away from people, away from noise. It resets my brain. But last fall, I learned there's a difference between alone and too alone. I picked a spot about 3 miles off the main trail, tucked between tall oaks, where the ground dipped just enough to block the wind. By the time I finished setting up the tent and eating a quick meal, the sun was gone. The woods at night are different. You think you know them, and then the dark takes over. Every rustle feels intentional. The firelight only reaches so far before the trees become a black wall. I went to sleep telling myself it was peaceful, that the silence was a good thing. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sound wasn't rhythmic, not like a deer picking its way through the underbrush. It was slower, heavier, human. I unzipped the tent just an inch. The fire had gone out completely, and the night pressed against my eyes. Still, I thought I saw something. A darker shadow among shadows, just past the tree line. Standing still, watching. I shut the flap fast, my hands shaking. Every thought in my head was loud. Maybe it's another camper. Maybe it's a hunter. Maybe it's nothing. But my gut knew it wasn't nothing. Then came the breathing. It was faint at first, like wind through the nylon. But then it grew clearer, raspy, uneven, right behind my head. I wanted to move, but my whole body felt pinned down. Every instinct told me not to unzip the tent again. Minutes passed like hours. The breathing stopped. The woods went dead silent. Eventually, against my better judgment, exhaustion pulled me under. When morning came, the first thing I did was check outside. The forest looked exactly the same as yesterday. No shadow, no sign of anyone. But then I circled the tent. The ground just behind it was disturbed. Soil pressed down in the shape of a crouch, as if something had been kneeling there, listening to me breathe all night long. This happened about 4 years ago. A friend and I were hiking upstate, trying to beat the fall crowds by going late in the season. We underestimated how fast it gets dark in the woods, though, and before long we lost the trail. It wasn't the first time we'd been careless, but this time we decided not to risk stumbling further in. We found a relatively flat patch of ground, started a small fire, and agreed to wait out the night. At first, it wasn't so bad. We joked around, tossed sticks into the flames, tried to act like we weren't two idiots stranded in the woods. But around midnight, my friend went quiet. "Do you see that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze. At first I thought he meant fireflies, but these weren't blinking. They were steady orbs of white light, glowing faintly between the trees. There were 3 at first, drifting slowly, weaving in and out of the pines. They didn't cast light on the trees around them, but they were bright enough that I couldn't write them off as reflections. "Maybe people with flashlights," I said, though I didn't believe it. The movements were too smooth, too slow. The orbs disappeared, then reappeared closer, then further, always circling. Neither of us dared to leave the fire. At one point, one of the lights came close. So close I could see the outline of bark inside its glow, warped and bent like looking through water. We didn't sleep. We sat until our fire turned to ash, flinching at every snap of a branch. Around 4 a.m., all the lights blinked out at once, as if someone had flipped a switch. In the morning, everything looked normal. Relieved, we packed up and started moving, laughing nervously about swamp gas, hallucinations, exhaustion, anything to explain it away. But before leaving, I noticed something in the dirt around our fire. Prints, small, human-shaped footprints. Bare feet. They circled where we had sat. So close they must have been there the whole night, just outside the glow of the flames. I grew up in a neighborhood that bordered a stretch of woods everyone said was haunted. We never believed that exactly, but it had a reputation. People claimed to hear voices, see figures, that sort of thing. Naturally, as teenagers, that meant it was the perfect hangout. One night, a group of us snuck out with flashlights and cheap beer. We weren't going far, just far enough to sit around and laugh without adults telling us to shut up. We were making a ton of noise when one of us noticed something. The trees had thinned out. We'd walked into a clearing none of us remembered being there. It was strange. Perfectly round. Grass short and damp, almost like a lawn that someone had been maintaining. At the very center stood a woman. She was facing away from us, her hair long, her dress pale against the dark. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. But the longer we stared, the less it felt like a person. She was too still, too deliberate. We whispered to each other, debating what to do. None of us wanted to get closer, but none of us could move either. Then, slowly, she turned her head. Her face wasn't grotesque, just wrong. Like every feature was off by a fraction. Too long, too far apart, like a bad copy of a human face. One of my friends muttered, "We need to go." But before we could, the woman raised her arm and pointed at us. We bolted. We tore through the trees, branches cutting our arms, roots tripping us. None of us looked back. When we burst out of the woods, panting and bleeding, we realized one of us, Kyle, was gone. Panic set in. We argued, shouted his name into the trees. Finally, maybe 20 minutes later, Kyle stumbled out from a different part of the woods. His clothes were damp, his face pale. "What the hell happened to you?" we demanded. Kyle just blinked, confused. "What do you mean? I've been with you the whole time." We argued, but he wouldn't budge. Swore he hadn't left our side. That's when I noticed his shoes. The soles were wet and covered in the same short grass from the clearing. Grass the rest of us had only stepped on for a few seconds before we ran.